I never imagined my life would end up here. Shivering beneath the shadow of rusted locomotives, my dog pressed close against my side for warmth. Just a few years earlier, I wore a uniform with pride, serving a country that promised honor in exchange for sacrifice. Back then I was Sergeant Daniel Carter, decorated, respected, and surrounded by men who'd give their lives for me, just as I would for them. Now I was just another forgotten veteran, a nameless man with no home, no family, and no place to go. The war had taken its toll in ways medals could never repair. The nightmares came first, the gunfire, the screams, the weight of decisions I couldn't undo. Then came the drinking, the failed marriage, and the jobs that slipped through my fingers when I couldn't keep it together. When the eviction notice was nailed to my apartment door, I had no one left to call. My parents were gone. My ex-wife wanted nothing to do with me. My old army brothers had scattered across the country, trying to survive their own battles. And so, I walked, through alleys, under bridges, into shelters when there was space, but mostly out in the cold where the world passed me by without a glance. The only reason I hadn't given up entirely was Max. He wasn't much to look at when I first found him, or maybe when he found me. Just a mangy German shepherd mix, ribs poking through, limping from some injury I couldn't identify. He'd appeared behind a diner one night, drawn by the same dumpster I was scrounging through for scraps. At first I chased him off. I could barely feed myself, let alone a dog. But he didn't leave. He followed me down the street, keeping his distance, watching with those intelligent amber eyes. Something about his persistence got to me. Maybe I saw myself in him, unwanted, hungry, surviving by stubbornness alone. I shared half a stale sandwich with him, and from that night on we were a pair. Max became my shadow, my guardian, and, whether I admitted it or not, the only reason I kept putting one foot in front of the other. Winter hit hard that year. Nights on the streets were brutal, and more than once I thought I wouldn't wake up. But Max would nudge me with his nose, press against me for warmth, even growl when anyone suspicious wandered too close. When you have nothing, loyalty means everything. It was on one of those bitter nights, wandering the outskirts of the city with nowhere to go, that I first laid eyes on the train yard. It stretched before us like a graveyard of steel and iron. Rows of rusted locomotives slumped on broken tracks, their paint-peeling windows shattered. Some were covered in graffiti, others swallowed by weeds and ivy. The place looked abandoned decades ago, left to rot while the world moved on. The air carried the metallic scent of rust mixed with oil that lingered from a time long past. To most people, it was just an eyesore. To me, it was shelter. Max tugged at the leash, ears pricked, tail stiff. He didn't growl, but his body was alert, as if he sensed something unusual about this place. I paused at the chain-link fence that surrounded the yard. The no trespassing signs were so faded, they were practically invisible. With a quick glance around, I found a section where the metal sagged. I pulled it back just enough for Max to slip through, then followed. Inside, the silence was heavy. No humming engines, no workers shouting, just the low moan of wind through broken windows. My boots crunched on gravel as I led Max past rows of cars, their once bright logos flaking into obscurity. It felt like stepping into another world, one where time had stopped. We found an old passenger car with a door that still slid open. The interior smelled of mildew, but the torn seats offered a place to rest. I laid my backpack down, and Max curled at my feet, his eyes never leaving the shadows near the door. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. We weren't on a freezing sidewalk or under a highway overpass. We had walls around us, a roof overhead. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, as the wind howled through the yard, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a faint metallic clank, like chains shifting, or a door closing. I held my breath, straining my ears. But the sound faded, swallowed by the night. Probably just the wind, I told myself, but Max's ears stayed pricked long after. Morning light revealed more of the yard's decay. I scavenged through abandoned offices nearby, finding a broken chair, a few crumpled newspapers, even an old thermos with just enough life left in it to hold water. Survival wasn't glamorous, but you learn to make do. The days blurred together. I'd go into town, try to pick up day labor when I could, bring back scraps for Max and me. At night, we'd retreat to the train yard, our hidden refuge. Nobody seemed to care about the place, and that suited me fine. But as weeks passed, I began to notice things. Other homeless folks avoided the yard, even when I suggested they join me for shelter. "Not that place," one muttered, eyes darting away. Another just shook his head, whispering, "Bad things down there." "Down where?" I asked, but no one ever explained. Max started acting stranger, too. He'd fixate on one corner of the yard, near a collapsed maintenance shed. At first I thought maybe a raccoon or stray cat had taken up residence, but the way he stared, ears forward, tail stiff, nose twitching, it was different, like he sensed something beneath the ground itself. I brushed it off. Dogs were dogs, and Max had a nose for trouble. But still I couldn't ignore the way the hairs on my neck stood up every time he froze, staring into the shadows. One evening, I sat outside our rail car watching the sunset bleed across the horizon, the sky painted in fire and ash. The world seemed so vast, and yet my own life had shrunk to scraps and rust. I thought about the man I used to be, the soldier who stood tall, the leader others depended on. Now I was just surviving, waiting for each day to end so the next could begin. But Max pressed his head against my knee, grounding me. His steady gaze said what words never could. "You're not alone." That night, as I drifted off, I heard it again. The metallic clank, echoing faintly from somewhere deep below the yard. Louder this time, clearer. "And Max," he growled. That was the beginning. The beginning of something I couldn't yet understand. Something buried beneath the abandoned train yard waiting to be uncovered. And if I'd known then just how deep it went, how much danger, how much truth, I might have turned and walked away. But I didn't. Because Max wouldn't let me. The train yard had become more than just shelter. It had become our world. Each row of rusted cars was like a chapter of forgotten history, and Max and I learned every creak, every broken window, every path that wound between the skeletal remains of locomotives. To outsiders, it was a graveyard. To us, it was home. But home came with shadows. By day, the place looked harmless enough. Sunlight spilled through cracks in the roofs, and pigeons fluttered in and out of hollowed cars. I'd walk into town, hustle for work, come back with enough to keep us fed. It was a routine, predictable, steady. By night, though, the yard changed. The wind carried strange echoes that didn't belong to the rusting steel. Sometimes it was a low groan, like something moving beneath the ground. Sometimes it was a sharp clang, as if a hammer struck metal. Once, I could have sworn I heard voices, muffled, distorted, like they were carried up through pipes. Max always heard it too. His ears would twitch, his nose lift, his growl vibrating low in his throat. He wasn't just reacting to noises, I could feel it. He was sensing something. I started to notice little details, fresh scuff marks on gravel where no one should have walked. A faint glow under one of the sheds when the moon was high. Once I found a padlock lying broken in the dirt, its shackle twisted unnaturally, as though it had been forced open. The strangest part. Every time I tried to follow these signs, the trail seemed to lead me back to that collapsed maintenance shed, the one Max couldn't stop staring at. I told myself it was nothing. The ramblings of a man who'd been through too much, left alone too long. Maybe the yard just creaked with age. Maybe vandals came through at night, breaking locks and spray-painting walls. But deep down I knew better. I'd learned to trust my instincts in the military, and those instincts were screaming that something was hidden here. One cold evening, I sat in the rail car with Max at my feet, staring at the ceiling. My fingers traced the edge of my dog tags, a habit I'd picked up whenever the past crept too close. I thought about the whispers I'd heard from other homeless folks, the ones who warned me away, bad things down there. What did they mean? I decided to test it. The next morning I circled the yard more carefully. I checked the shed, the office ruins, the fences. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Faint square outlines in the dirt near the shed, like there had once been a heavy grate or hatch. Over time, weeds and debris had hidden it, but the shape was still there if you looked closely. Max pawed at it, as if to confirm my suspicion. "Easy, boy," I muttered, crouching down. I brushed aside the dirt, my heart thudding. Sure enough, beneath the soil lay a rusted metal cover, big enough for a man to climb through. A handle jutted out, corroded but intact. It looked like an entrance. I froze, staring at it. My first thought was, why would there be a hidden hatch in a train yard? Maintenance tunnels, maybe? But why bury it? Why lock it, then smash the lock? Questions piled up, and every answer felt worse than the last. That night, I didn't sleep. Max stayed restless, pacing, ears flicking at sounds I couldn't hear. Every creak of steel, every shift of wind put me on edge. Finally, I sat up, running my hands over my face. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening in this yard, something under our feet. The soldier in me, the one I thought I'd buried, started to wake up again. My training whispered, observe, analyze, prepare. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about uncovering the truth. And the truth, I feared, was waiting below. The only question was whether Max and I were ready to face it. Morning light filtered through the jagged holes in the old train cars, casting slanted beams across the yard. I stood over the rusted hatch with Max beside me, my breath forming white clouds in the cold air. For hours I'd debated whether to open it, pacing circles until the gravel was worn smooth. Curiosity gnawed at me, but so did caution. Max pressed his nose against the metal handle, giving a low whine. His eyes met mine, sharp and insistent. "You want me to open it, don't you?" I muttered. He wagged his tail once, then sat back waiting. I crouched down, ran my fingers over the hatch. The surface was cool, damp with morning dew. Layers of rust had eaten away at it, but the structure held. I wrapped my hand around the handle and tugged. It didn't budge. I pulled harder. Nothing. Frustrated, I grabbed a loose steel rod from the scrap pile nearby, wedged it into the latch, and heaved. With a shriek of protesting metal, the hatch shifted. Dust and dirt crumbled away as the slab groaned open, releasing a stale, musty smell that crawled up from the dark below. A narrow shaft yawned beneath us, leading into blackness. Rusted metal rungs clung to the walls, disappearing into the void. I leaned over, shining my phone's flashlight inside. The beam cut through dust and shadows, revealing concrete walls streaked with water stains. At the bottom, maybe 15 feet down, was a corridor stretching away into the earth. Max growled low, his hackles rising, but he didn't back away. He leaned forward, sniffing, alert. "Well, boy," I whispered, "looks like we found ourselves a rabbit hole." I dropped a small rock inside. It clattered against the ladder, then landed with a faint echo that seemed to go on too long. The sound of emptiness. For a moment I considered closing the hatch, burying it back under the dirt, pretending none of this existed. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous, but another voice, just as strong, whispered that this was what I'd been waiting for. A purpose. A mission. That night I prepared. I scavenged supplies, a flashlight, a length of rope, a crowbar, even a half-empty backpack I'd found in a trash heap. Old habits kicked in. I mapped escape routes, rehearsed steps in my head, planned for worst-case scenarios. When darkness fell, I returned to the hatch. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, but here, only the moon lit our path. Max stayed glued to my side, tail stiff, ears twitching. "Stay with me, buddy," I said, gripping the rope tight. I hooked the rope to a sturdy beam of the shed, tested the knot twice, then began the descent. The metal rungs groaned under my weight, flakes of rust crumbling beneath my boots. Max whined at the edge, pacing, then surprised me. He started climbing down after me. "Easy, careful," I whispered, guiding him step by step. Somehow the dog managed, his claws scraping metal as he followed. At the bottom the air was cooler, heavier, filled with the scent of mildew and something else. Oil, maybe. My flashlight beam sliced through the dark, revealing a corridor about 6 feet wide, lined with old pipes and wires. The walls were marked with faded stencils. Maintenance Tunnel 3C. But this didn't feel like maintenance. The corridor stretched farther than I expected, sloping gently downward. My footsteps echoed, joined by the soft tap of Max's paws. Every sound carried, magnified by the silence. I felt exposed, like we weren't just walking into the dark. We were being pulled into it. After maybe 50 yards, the tunnel split, left or right. The left corridor was blocked by a pile of collapsed concrete, dust still hanging in the air like the cave-in had happened recently. The right path was clear, vanishing into the shadows. Max sniffed both directions, then fixed his gaze firmly to the right, giving a sharp bark. "All right," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Right it is." We moved forward, deeper underground. The smell of oil grew stronger. My flashlight caught glimpses of strange symbols etched into the walls, circles intersecting lines, triangles within triangles, not graffiti. These looked deliberate. Then came the sound. Faint at first, like a whisper of machinery far away, a low hum that rose and fell, steady as a heartbeat. I froze, listening. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the wind. Something was running down here. Max stiffened, ears pricked, eyes locked ahead. I tightened my grip on the crowbar, pulse quickening. Whatever was beneath this train yard, it wasn't abandoned, and we weren't alone. The hum grew louder with every step we took, vibrating faintly in the soles of my boots. It was steady, rhythmic, like a generator or a giant fan hidden deep in the earth. Each beat of that sound seemed to echo inside my chest, almost like my heart was sinking to it. Max walked ahead, nose low, shoulders tense. His nails clicked softly against the concrete, the only sound besides that mechanical pulse. Every few feet he stopped, sniffed the stale air, then glanced back at me as if to say, "Keep moving, we're close." The deeper we went, the colder the tunnel became. The air felt thicker, heavy with dust and oil. My flashlight caught flecks of moisture on the walls, trickling down in thin lines. Old pipes ran above our heads, some still dripping. Others were so corroded they looked ready to burst. Then the walls changed. Up until now they'd been plain concrete, military-grade, rough utilitarian, but suddenly the surface smoothed out. Glossy black panels, almost metallic, replaced the stone. They reflected my light faintly, like mirrors dulled by time. Strange markings were etched into them, those same symbols we'd seen before, but sharper, more precise. "This isn't just maintenance," I muttered under my breath. Max gave a low growl. His fur bristled as he sniffed the panels, then pulled back with a sharp bark. The hum quickened. Or maybe my pulse did. We reached a bend in the tunnel, and that's when I saw it. A door. It wasn't like the hatch we'd pried open. This was something different. Large, rectangular, embedded flush into the wall. A heavy steel slab with no visible hinges, no handle. Only a small black square about chest height. My flashlight caught the faint outline of a keypad, covered in dust but still intact. "An access point," I whispered. I wiped it with my sleeve, revealing rows of buttons, numbers glowing faintly beneath the grime. Power was still running here, after all these years. Someone had kept this alive. Max pressed his paw against the door, whining. I tried the keypad, randomly pressing a sequence, nothing, no response. My hand hovered, itching to try again, but something told me not to. This wasn't just a locked room, it was a barrier. The hum was coming from behind it. And then I froze. Footsteps, faint, distant, echoing through the tunnel from the direction we'd come. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. Max's ears shot up, his body stiffened. He turned toward the sound, lips curling into a silent snarl. I killed the flashlight instantly, plunging us into darkness. My breath caught in my throat as the sound grew clearer. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide. One step, another, the faint scrape of a boot sole on concrete. I pressed my back to the wall, clutching the crowbar tight, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Max stayed low beside me, silent, waiting for my signal. The footsteps reached the bend in the tunnel, just out of sight. For a moment they stopped. Silence pressed down around us, suffocating. Then a faint beam of light cut through the dark. Another flashlight. I swallowed hard, adrenaline surging. Whoever this was, they weren't just another drifter or scavenger like me. They knew these tunnels. They belonged here. The light bobbed closer, sweeping across the walls. My grip tightened on the crowbar, ready to swing. But before they came into view, The keypad on the door behind me gave a sudden beep. I spun around. The faint glow of the numbers shifted. A sequence appeared on the screen, flickering like it had been activated remotely. 0419. The lock hissed. The steel door groaned. A thin line of white light split down the center as it began to open. Max barked once, sharp, urgent. The footsteps quickened, and in that moment, with no time to think, I had to make a choice. Step inside and face whatever was waiting in the hidden chamber, or stay in the tunnel and confront whoever was coming for us. I grabbed Max's collar, whispered, "With me," and pulled him toward the widening gap. Because deep down, I knew one thing. Whatever was on the other side of that door, it was what we'd been meant to find. The door slid open with a groan that echoed like thunder through the tunnel. Dust rained down from the ceiling, disturbed by machinery that hadn't moved in decades. Max darted forward immediately, his nose pressed low to the ground, tail stiff and ears high. I followed, stepping across the threshold, and what I saw froze me in place. The chamber was massive, far bigger than anything I'd expected. It stretched out like an underground hangar, the ceiling so high my flashlight beam couldn't find its end. Rows of rusted steel beams crisscrossed above, supporting catwalks that disappeared into the shadows. And beneath them, lined in perfect order, were machines. Not trains, not vehicles I recognized. These were enormous cylinders, each the size of a shipping container, resting on support rails. Pipes coiled into them like veins, while thick cables snaked up into the ceiling. They glistened faintly, as if moisture had preserved them in some strange way. At the far wall, a massive control console blinked with faint green lights. After all these years, it was still alive. This is impossible, I muttered. Max padded ahead, sniffing one of the cylinders. His nails scraped against the metal surface. It wasn't rusted at all. It looked almost new, untouched by time. He gave a sharp bark and stepped back, hackles raised. I approached slowly, running my fingers across the cold steel. The surface was smooth, but etched into it were more of those strange markings. Not letters, not numbers, symbols that almost looked alive under the glow of my light. That's when I realized this wasn't some abandoned maintenance tunnel. It was a vault, and whatever they'd stored here, it had been meant to stay hidden. I turned to the control console, drawn to the glow of its screen. The display was dim, cracked in places, but I could make out fragments of text. Lines of code flickered, broken messages repeating in a loop. System alert. Primary lockdown engaged. Access requires dual authorization. Dual authorization. 2 people. Which meant someone else had been down here. Maybe recently. Max growled low again, ears pinned forward. His gaze wasn't on the console. It was locked on the tunnel behind us. The footsteps. I spun, killing my flashlight. The chamber plunged into darkness. The only light the faint green glow of the console. For a few heartbeats, all I heard was the pounding of my pulse. Then, there it was again. The scrape of boots. Closer this time. Whoever had been following us had found the door too. I grabbed Max's collar and ducked behind one of the massive cylinders, crouching low. My breath felt deafening in my ears as I strained to listen. The sound of the door sliding fully open. A beam of light swept into the chamber, jerking left and right as its owner stepped inside. "Come out!" a man's voice echoed low and commanding. Max tensed, ready to lunge, but I held him back, whispering, "Not yet." The footsteps crunched closer. The flashlight beam passed across the consoles, across the machines, then paused on the far wall. Whoever this was, they weren't surprised by what they were seeing. They knew about it. Maybe they'd been guarding it all along. That thought made my skin crawl. I shifted my weight, ready to move, when suddenly the console gave a loud beep. The screen flickered. New text appeared. Second user detected. Authorization in progress. The man froze. His flashlight beam snapped toward the console. "No," he muttered under his breath. "Not now." Max growled, the sound rolling deep in his chest. I tightened my grip on him, but inside my mind was racing. If the system thought 2 users were present, then maybe my presence had activated something. And if the machine was unlocking, it wasn't because of him, it was because of us. The cylinders around us gave a faint hiss, a sound like pressure being released. One by one, tiny lights blinked on across their surfaces, glowing faint blue. Max barked sharply. The sound ricocheted off the steel walls like a gunshot. The man swore under his breath, then shouted into the chamber, "You don't know what you're doing. Step away before it's too late." His voice wasn't angry. It was desperate. But before I could respond, the floor beneath us gave a subtle rumble. Dust fell from the ceiling. The machines were waking up. And for the first time since stepping into that yard, I wondered if maybe the real danger wasn't the stranger behind us, but the secret we had just awakened. The hiss of the cylinders deepened into a steady rumble, like a sleeping giant beginning to stir. A faint vibration trembled through the chamber floor, rattling the bolts at my feet. Max pressed closer to me, his ears flat, every muscle in his body rigid as if he knew the world itself was shifting. "Turn it off," the man's voice barked again, harsher this time. "You don't know what you've started." My eyes darted toward the console, its screen now pulsed with new text, flashing across lines of corrupted code. "Primary systems rebooting, standby. Vault access unlocking." A chill ran through me. Vault access? What in God's name had I just triggered? The man's flashlight beam cut across the room again, but this time it caught his face. He wasn't some vagrant scavenger like me. He was older, maybe late 50s, his jaw square, his hair cropped short to the skull streaked grey. A heavy military jacket clung to his frame, medals sewn into the breast. His eyes, sharp, unyielding, locked onto me across the chamber. "Step away from the machine," he said again, softer now, but no less forceful. Max snarled, low and steady. I tightened my grip on his collar but didn't move. "Who the hell are you?" I shot back. The man hesitated before answering. "Someone who's been keeping this place sealed for a long, long time." He edged closer, boots echoing on the steel floor. "This yard, it isn't just abandoned property. It's a cover. What you're standing in is classified, son, buried so deep even most of Washington forgot it existed." My pulse hammered. Classified. Forgotten. I wanted to laugh, but the machines humming behind me made the sound stick in my throat. "What's inside those things?" I demanded, nodding toward the glowing cylinders. His gaze flicked to them, then back to me. "Cargo, dangerous cargo. Cargo that was never meant to see the light of day again." The words made my stomach knot. Dangerous cargo. Suddenly the billion-dollar treasure I'd imagined didn't feel so exciting. Before I could press him further, the console beeped again, loud, sharp. The floor rumbled harder. A seam of light cracked open along the far wall, as if some deeper door was unlocking. Max barked furiously, pulling at the collar, his instincts screaming that we had to move. The man's face twisted. "Damn it! You've broken the failsafe!" He bolted toward the console, slamming his hand against the keys. But the screen only blared back in cold green text. "Access granted. Proceed." The sound of grinding metal filled the chamber. Dust poured down in sheets as the far wall split, inch by inch, revealing a black void beyond. A rush of cold air whooshed out, stale and suffocating, like the breath of a tomb disturbed. The man turned on me, eyes burning. "Listen to me. If you value your life, you walk away now. Leave this yard. Forget you ever saw it." But Max barked again, sharp and insistent, tugging toward the widening gap in the wall. His whole body quivered with urgency, as though he already knew what waited inside. I shook my head slowly, heart thundering. "I don't think I can do that." The man's jaw clenched. He looked at me not with hatred, but with something closer to sorrow. "Then God help us all." At that exact moment, another sound pierced the chamber, the distant wail of sirens. Red and blue lights flickered against the tunnel walls outside. The police. My stomach dropped. The authorities had arrived, maybe tipped off by someone watching the yard. The man cursed under his breath. "They can't find this place, not now." The cylinders hissed again, louder. The seam in the wall widened another foot, revealing the faint gleam of something metallic deep inside. The man raised his voice over the noise. "You've got two choices. Follow me, and maybe survive what's coming, or stay, and let that thing eat you alive." Max barked once more, eyes fixed on the opening. I didn't know if I trusted this stranger, but one thing was clear. The vault was waking up. The police were closing in, and whatever had been buried here for decades was no longer staying quiet. And for the first time, I realized we were in the middle of something far bigger than a ruined train yard. The sirens grew louder until they roared just outside the yard. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel, shouted commands, the slam of car doors. "Police! Surround the area!" Max barked wildly, his deep voice echoing through the tunnels. He wasn't barking at the stranger now. He was barking toward the entrance, toward the swarm of flashlights piercing the darkness beyond. The man in the military jacket cursed under his breath, pulling me sharply behind one of the massive cylinders. His grip was like iron. "Quiet the dog now," I snapped back. "You think I can just—" "Do it," he hissed. His face was taut, urgent. I knelt, gripping Max's fur, whispering for him to hush. He resisted, his growls vibrating through my palm, but finally fell into a low, restless whine. Boots thundered into the chamber entrance. Flashlights danced across the metal walls, slicing through dust clouds. "There," a voice barked. "Someone's down here." The beams swept closer. I could already see the outlines of armed officers fanning out across the chamber, weapons raised. I froze. Every instinct screamed to surrender, to raise my hands and avoid a bullet. But the man grabbed my arm, his whisper sharp as a blade. "If they find this vault, you won't be arrested. You'll disappear. Classified. Gone." My chest tightened. His words cut through me like ice. Disappear. The grinding of metal echoed louder than ever. The wall had split open another 2 feet, revealing what looked like a staircase descending into blackness. Faint, cold light pulsed from below, as if something alive stirred down there. The police spotted the movement. "What the hell is that?" one shouted, their flashlight beams stabbing toward the widening gap. The man beside me snapped, "We move now." He grabbed my shoulder and pulled hard, urging me toward the stairwell. "Wait," I whispered harshly. "They'll shoot us." "Better a bullet than what's coming out of there," he shot back. Max growled again, tugging toward the glowing staircase as if siding with the stranger. My mind reeled. Trust the cops, the people who might save me but would almost certainly take me in for trespassing? Or trust this shadow of a man who claimed he'd been guarding secrets that were never supposed to be touched? "Drop your weapon," an officer shouted at the stranger who hadn't even raised a gun. "Hands on your head now." The man slowly raised his hands, his gaze still locked on me. "Decide," he said flatly. "With them, or with me." My throat tightened. My whole life had been about rules, order, obedience. The army had drilled it into me. But looking at the yawning black of that staircase, the machines hissing, the wall groaning open, I knew rules no longer applied here. I grabbed Max's collar and bolted, straight toward the stairwell. The stranger's jaw twitched, relief flashing across his features. He spun, following close behind. Shouts erupted from the police. "Stop, don't move." Gunfire cracked, sharp and deafening, bullets sparking against the steel floor. Max yelped as one ricocheted nearby, but we kept moving, sprinting toward the gap. The chamber rattled, a roar swelling beneath our feet like a storm rising from the earth itself. And then we plunged into the darkness, swallowed whole by the vault. The last thing I heard before the door sealed behind us was the furious pounding of boots and the echo of the police shouting, "Seal this place, nobody in or out." And then silence. We were alone in the depths. The stairwell swallowed us whole, its steel steps groaning beneath our weight. The sound of the vault door grinding shut above echoed like thunder until it faded into silence, leaving only the scrape of boots and Max's soft panting. The walls here were unlike anything I'd ever seen, not just old steel or concrete, but a strange alloy that shimmered faintly under the pale glow emanating from somewhere far below. Every step downward felt like crossing into another world. The stranger, still without a name, kept his pace steady, his hand brushing the wall as though he'd walked these stairs before. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at him for dragging me into this, but the silence was too heavy, too sacred to break. Finally, the staircase opened into a vast corridor. My breath caught. The tunnel stretched farther than my eyes could follow, lined with enormous pipes that pulsed faintly, like veins carrying light instead of blood. The air was cool, metallic, humming faintly with a vibration that seemed to seep into my bones. Max sniffed the ground, ears twitching. his entire body on edge. He wasn't afraid. He was alert, as if some primal instinct told him this place mattered. I finally spoke, my voice low and hoarse. "What is this place?" The stranger's jaw tightened. "Cold War insurance, or at least that's what it started as." "Started as?" I pressed. He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured forward. "We move. Keep your dog close. There are things down here you don't want him chasing." That sent a chill through me. We followed the corridor until it opened into an enormous chamber, bigger than any hangar I'd ever been inside. Catwalks crisscrossed the cavern, and below them were rows of strange pods, each the size of a train car, lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. A soft, rhythmic hiss echoed through the chamber, followed by a faint flash of light inside one of the pods. I froze. "Are those—" I started. "They're not missiles," the man interrupted sharply. "They're containment." "Containment for what?" This time, his silence felt like an answer all on its own. Max whined suddenly, tugging at his leash, pulling me toward the far end of the chamber. His nose pressed to the ground, then lifted, tracing something invisible in the air. His growls echoed in the cavern. I followed his gaze. One of the pods, larger than the rest, was cracked open. Its interior glowed faintly, and wisps of something like fog drifted out, curling in tendrils that seemed to pulse with their own strange life. The stranger swore under his breath, rushing forward. "No, no, no, no." "What?" I demanded, my heart hammering. "That pod was never supposed to open." His voice was tight, panicked in a way I hadn't yet seen from him. I glanced back the way we'd come, half expecting the police to burst in after us. But the vault door had sealed shut, and here, in this underground maze, it felt like we were cut off from the entire world. And something about that pod told me. Maybe that was the point. Max barked sharply, his hackles raised, his body trembling with anticipation. He wasn't just warning us, he was bracing. Something moved in the fog. The fog swirled like it had a mind of its own, curling around the steel catwalk, spilling toward us in slow, deliberate tendrils. Max barked again, low and feral, his body rigid against the leash. He wasn't warning us this time, he was protecting me. I gripped the railing, staring as a shape began to form inside the glow. At first, it looked human. A figure hunched inside the cracked pod, unmoving. My chest tightened. Was it a body? Some long-forgotten corpse sealed away? But then the head turned. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, alive with a strange energy. The stranger cursed under his breath, pulling a weapon from under his coat. "Back, now!" "What is that?" I demanded, unable to tear my gaze away. He leveled his gun at the thing, his voice sharp and filled with dread. An experiment, from a time when governments thought they could play God. The figure stepped out of the fog, and I realized with horror it wasn't entirely human. Its skin shimmered with metallic veins, its movements too smooth, too precise. A prototype. A soldier, not born, but built. The cracked pod behind it hissed, releasing another wave of light. The stranger fired. The shot cracked through the cavern, echoing like thunder. The figure staggered, sparks bursting from its shoulder, but it didn't fall. It looked at us, really looked, and for a heartbeat I felt something I couldn't explain. Not malice, not mercy, just awareness. Max lunged forward, teeth bared, but I yanked him back. My heart pounded like a war drum. "Why is this down here? Why seal it away?" "Because it worked too well," the man snapped, reloading. "They weren't supposed to wake up." The figure tilted its head, almost curious. Then, in a voice that was both synthetic and achingly human, it whispered, "Where is the war?" The words hit me like a hammer. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just some weapon. It was a remnant of an age where fear had driven people to bury nightmares underground. The stranger grabbed my arm, dragging me toward another tunnel. "We can't stay. If one's awake, the rest could follow. We need to reach the control core now." Behind us, the figure stepped fully from the pod, its glowing veins pulsing brighter with each movement. And for the first time, I noticed something worse. The other pods were humming. All of them. Max growled, pressing against my leg as though to shield me. The stranger's grip tightened painfully. "This is what your train yard was hiding," he said, his voice a grim whisper. "Not treasure, not relics, a secret army, one your country buried and forgot." The humming grew louder, filling the chamber with a sound like a heartbeat, steady, inevitable. My chest tightened, and then the realization crashed down on me with brutal clarity. This wasn't just a vault, it was a tomb, and now the dead were stirring. The hum grew unbearable. The cavern walls vibrated with it, dust falling in thin sheets from the ceiling. The pods that had slept for decades now glowed with pulsing veins of light, each one threatening to spill its contents into the world above. Max barked furiously, straining against the leash, his instincts screaming louder than mine. The stranger pulled me toward the far end of the chamber, where a rusted steel door stood, half buried in the wall. "This way," he shouted over the noise. "Control cores through here, only way to stop them." I followed, stumbling over the uneven ground. My heart raced, but I couldn't help glancing back. The figure that had already awakened was watching us. Its eyes, pale blue flames in the darkness, weren't filled with rage. They were filled with longing. "Where is the war?" it repeated, softer this time, as though pleading for an answer. The stranger cursed under his breath and jammed a heavy keycard into the panel beside the steel door. Sparks flew, gears clanked, and the ancient mechanism groaned open. Beyond lay a chamber bathed in the cold glow of monitors, decades old but still alive, their static flicker casting long shadows. "This is it," he said, rushing to the console, "the failsafe system. We can shut it all down from here, if the core's still intact." I hovered by the doorway, Max pressed against my leg, ears pinned back. The humming from the vault outside was growing faster now, like a heartbeat pushed into panic. I knew what it meant. The other pods were moments away from opening. The stranger's fingers danced across the controls, muttering to himself. Then he froze, his face drained of color. "It's not a shutdown system," he said quietly. "It's a choice." My stomach knotted. "What kind of choice?" He turned to me, eyes hollow. "We can seal the vault again, but sealing it means flooding the entire chamber with liquid fire. It'll burn everything inside. The prototypes, the pods, all of it. No waking, no future threat." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But it'll also collapse the train yard above. Everything you own, you'll lose it all." The words hit me harder than I expected. My train yard, my last refuge, the place Max and I had called home when we had nowhere else. "And the other option?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. He gestured to another console, an activation sequence. "We could stabilize them, let them live. They'd wake but controlled this time, contained. You'd have allies, if you wanted to call them that. A secret no one else knows. But once they're out, there's no undoing it. You'd be keeping the past alive." I stared at the glowing screen, torn in two. Destroy them, and I'd erase a nightmare. But also my home. Save them, and I might unleash something far worse than I could ever control. Max whined, his nose nudging my hand. His eyes, deep and steady, said more than words ever could. He didn't trust them, and maybe neither should I. The stranger's voice cut through the silence. "Decide. Now." The humming grew deafening. A hiss echoed from the vault. Another pod was cracking open. I closed my eyes, inhaling the damp, metallic air. My life had been a series of losses. My home, my family, my place in the world. The train yard was the only thing I had left. But Max was more than property, more than a roof or land. He was my reason to keep moving, my compass, and his compass pointed toward survival. I opened my eyes, teeth clenched. "Seal it." The stranger nodded once, grim but relieved. He slammed the override, and sirens wailed. Red lights strobed. From deep within the cavern, a rush of liquid fire roared like a tidal wave unleashed. The humming turned into a chorus of screams, not human, not machine, but something caught between. The pods cracked, shattered, then melted under the searing flood. The awakened figure, its blue eyes locking with mine one last time, lifted a hand, not in rage, not in violence, in understanding. Then the flames consumed it. The heat seared my skin even from behind the steel door. Max pressed against me, trembling. The cavern shook as the fire collapsed walls, sealing the vault forever under tons of rubble. Minutes felt like hours before the noise faded, replaced by a heavy, endless silence. The stranger pulled me away from the console. "It's done. But so is your train yard. By morning, nothing will be left standing." I swallowed hard, staring at the closed door. My chest ached with loss, but also with something else. Relief. We climbed back to the surface in silence. The cold night air slapped my face as I stepped out into the yard. The rusted train cars looked the same, but I knew beneath them lay nothing but ash and buried secrets. The stranger stopped at the edge of the yard, his coat whipping in the wind. "You made the right choice," he said. "The world doesn't need those things waking up, not now, maybe not ever." He looked at Max and almost smiled. "And you've got something better anyway." Before I could reply, he vanished into the shadows, leaving no trace he'd ever been there. I sank down onto the steps of my cabin, Max curling at my feet. The weight of what I'd done pressed heavy on me, but when I looked at him, I knew I'd chosen right. The train yard was gone. Tomorrow it would crumble, but Max and we were still here. And sometimes survival was the only victory you needed. I scratched behind his ears, whispering into the night. "We'll start again, buddy, just you and me, always." The wind howled through the hollow yard, carrying with it the last echoes of the vault. A secret buried once more. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free.